A woman asked her husband for a kiss before allowing him to fly alone on a business trip, but she didn't realize that the kiss would bring him a series of bad luck. When she turned on the gossip news an hour later, she saw that her husband's flight had exploded and crashed. Everyone on board was dead. Gina thought she was seeing things. She took out her husband's flight information and compared it to her husband's flight information and found that it was exactly the same. She was devastated on the spot. However, when she gathered her emotions and went with her husband's two brothers to the airline's memorial conference, she was told that her husband was not on the death list. The elder brother, who was a police officer, immediately contacted the police force to make inquiries. He learned that his second brother was not on the plane at all. Gina was shocked. She drove her husband to the airport and saw him walk in. If he's really alive, why didn't he show up? And where is he now? She called her husband immediately, but in the end, she found his mobile phone under the bedroom cupboard. But her husband was a surgeon. He was a surgeon and never left his mobile phone behind. Was he trying to make everyone think he was missing? In order to find out where her husband was, she immediately went to the airport with her brother-in-law to retrieve. To her surprise, she found that her husband Bob did walk into the airport, but he didn't go to the boarding gate. He went to the pickup point. He wandered around for an hour, until a mother and son arrived and the husband immediately went up to her and hugged her. After a few words, the three of them left the airport in a car together, and after that, there was no surveillance. Gina looked into it but never saw the mysterious mother and son. She instantly suspected that her husband had betrayed her. The elder brother denied it and said he grew up watching his brother. He's not that kind of person, but Gina's intuition told him there was something wrong with this woman. She asked her brother to find out who she was. However, the next strange thing is that when he got the boarding information of the mother and son from the company, his superiors suddenly warned him to withdraw from the case. He asked why, but they wouldn't tell him the real reason. But after all, it was his own brother who had disappeared. He refused to listen and gave Gina the mother and son's information, but they checked the passports and found that they were fake. The only thing they were sure of was that they were from the Middle East. Seeing that this hard-earned clue is broken again, Gina still refused to give up. In order to find out who the mother and son were, he came to the third brother, who was the closest to her husband. But the third brother just took one look and said he didn't know this woman. He even denied that he had a mistress. He even gave his word of honor to comfort the grieving Gina. But Gina didn't realize that third brother's expression was always evasive. He seemed to be hiding something. Once he got home, he warned his daughter-in-law Tina not to tell Gina the truth, because Bob does have a relationship with that mysterious woman. Although he said he was doing it for the sake of his second brother, Tina can see that he doesn't want Gina to be sad. Back then, third brother and Bob both had a crush on Gina, but Gina finally chose Bob. Seeing her husband care so much about other people's business made Tina a bit jealous. What's even more annoying is that third brother even volunteered to keep watch outside Gina's house, but the next scene shocked her 12 times. Just after dark, the second brother, who had been missing for a week, suddenly appeared and returned home. The third brother immediately called out to him, but Bob only looked back at him. Two mysterious men appeared behind him and tied him up to take him away. Bob frantically begged for help, but when he saw his brother being kidnapped, he didn't stop them or call the police. He got into the car and stayed there until Bob was taken away. Then he slowly got out and knocked on Gina's door. Then he went inside, closing the door behind him. From the next day onwards, Gina came to work at her brother's company as usual, but he asked her not to work, just take a good rest. But when she woke up in the office, she was chatting with Sandy's daughter-in-law, and Tina deliberately told her that her husband was keeping a mysterious woman outside the office. Gina was so scared that she went to Sandy to ask him about it. He couldn't hide it any longer, so he told the truth. It turns out that 7 years ago Bob went to Iran for an operation. That's where he met the mystery woman who used to be a nurse. Gina was furious. She immediately rushed to her husband's hospital office to search for evidence. After searching carefully, she found that he did have another phone card, so she dialed the number immediately. But she didn't realize it was the two people who had kidnapped her husband. They didn't want Bob in the boot to answer for fear of being exposed. But Gina's intuition told her that it wasn't her husband on the other end of the line. He wanted to know who was on the other end. Immediately handed over the mobile phone to his brother. After an IP search, they found the number was still in China. Thinking that her husband might be there, she and her brother immediately drove to follow the location of the mobile phone. They ended up in a border area a few dozen kilometers away. It's a roadside rest stop, and Gina found her husband's mobile phone in a rubbish bin. It had to be here. She's been to every restaurant and car park in the rest area, but no one has seen him. She was in a state of anxiety. She didn't realize her husband was in the boot of a car not far from her. The moment he saw Gina, he desperately tried to call for help but couldn't make a sound. The wife was shocked to discover that her husband, who had been dead for a week, had turned up on the surveillance camera. He was supposed to have died in the crash, but instead of boarding the plane, he wandered around the airport. He eventually left with a mysterious mother and son. At first she thought her husband had been swindled. Every day, she and her brother searched for him like crazy, but soon after, she suddenly received a mysterious parcel that was supposed to be sent to her husband. Inside was a paternity test for her husband and two little boys. The results showed that they were father and son. She suddenly realized that her husband had betrayed her. She thought the woman he saw at the airport was his lover. She ran away with him, so she collected all her husband's things and threw them out in front of her son. She vowed never to seek him out again. She would go wherever she wanted. But the next day she was suddenly approached by a team of police who suspected her husband of being a terrorist. Because he was the only passenger who didn't board the plane, Gina was puzzled. Even if her husband was a bad guy, he couldn't be dangerous. But she cooperated with the investigation because of the police force. But to her surprise, the police found a new children's jumper in her husband's car. Gina took a closer look and saw that it was her son's favorite brand. Obviously, her husband bought it before he had a chance to give it to her son, which means he has no intention of abandoning her and her son. And then she received a mysterious phone call to her husband. When she heard that the caller was also looking for her husband, Gina immediately asked who the caller was. But there was a sudden silence. When she tried to follow up, the caller hung up. Intuition tells her that the caller must have something to do with her husband's disappearance. She immediately went to her brother, who is a police officer, to ask him to help her find the source of the call. After some searching, she found that the caller was calling from a hospital a kilometer away. Gina was so excited that she checked this, but unfortunately didn't capture his face. Unfortunately, the surveillance camera didn't capture his face. The clue that finally appeared was broken. Where was her husband? After waiting for a few days, Gina saw her husband's wanted notice in the newspaper. Everyone suspected him of being responsible for the plane crash. She was furious. She went straight to her husband's third brother and confronted the detective investigating the case. They seemed to know she was coming. They showed her a surveillance camera that she had never seen before. It showed her husband leaving the airport with the mystery mother and son in a white car. This angle caught the driver's face. The detective had to suspect that this man was an accomplice to her husband's crime. Gina was asked if they knew each other. She and her brother said they didn't know the driver, but in fact, they both did. The driver just didn't want to involve a police officer he didn't trust, because the driver is the fourth brother, who has long been estranged from her husband's three brothers. He used to go to the Middle East to do some petty business. The four brothers hadn't been together for 5 years, but strangely, the fourth brother suddenly appeared at Gina's 7th birthday a fortnight ago. At that time, Gina thought he was just homesick, but now he seems to have a problem. He must know where her husband is, so she went to his house immediately, but only his girlfriend was there. She said he's been out for a fortnight and hasn't come back. She couldn't even reach him by phone. She felt that something had happened to him. Gina thinks both brothers are missing. So what are they hiding?